Hey everybody, this is Rudy Sarzo with The Dash, and today we have a special guest whose podcast has been 45 years in the making. Mr. Frankie Banali.
Yay! Hi, I'm Frankie Banali.
Okay, let's just jump into this.
Okay,
let's talk about the first time we met. About 45 years ago. Was that 72 or
72?
72.
Yeah, it was 1972. The setup for this is I was in a three-piece in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, called Ginger. And we did half original material and half like Jeff Beck and Hendrix and Led Zeppelin, stuff like that. So we had the opportunity to open up a show for David Bowie on the Ziggy Stardust tour at a place called Pirates World. And unbeknownst to me, in the audience was one, Mr. Rudy Sarzo, and his younger brother, Robert Sarzo. And a couple of days, actually it was, I think it was the next day, because I think it was your birthday. I think it was November 18th. And I guess you went to the Flying Machine to celebrate, which was a local hang we used to both play at. And I don't think Rudy could really. I had a huge drum set at the time, so I don't think you could see exactly what I looked like. And so he saw me. Rudy saw me at the club, and he comes up and he thinks I'm the bass player, and he goes off and starts telling the bass player how much he enjoyed the drummer's drumming. And I just stood there, big grin on my face, taking it all in, going, this guy's very complimentary and he's nuts. and when you were done with your speech, I put my hand out and I said, by the way, I'm Frankie Banali, I'm the drummer. And you turned around and walked away.
I was a little bit embarrassed, Okay, that's your point of view of the story. So
right.
I'm going to mention mine.
Of course.
Okay,
of course,
so
of course.
I go to Pirates World, and was like amusement park / concert venue.
Parking lot concert venue.
Exactly.
Basically, there was a stage in the parking lot.
But so many bands played there. I mean, I saw Deep Purple, and of course,
I saw Led Zeppelin. I saw there the Faces.
The
Jeff
Faces.
Beck, everybody.
Yeah. Everybody played there, and of course, on that date, it was Bowie headlining with you guys.
Yeah. Now, the only reason we were playing that show is the band that was supposed to open up the show, Nitzinger, canceled at the last minute. And so I was friends with Lou Dickstein from Concerts West, which were the big concert promoters on the East Coast. And so that's how we got the gig. It's not like, we were the first call band. We were the only call band in that situation.
Yeah. But thank God that happened, because I got to see you play for the first time, and I walk in, and, you guys were the opening band, and I'm looking at the band, and I couldn't take my eyes off the big drum kit, which is a beautiful drum kit. I mean, you have more drums than I've ever seen,
I bought the entire page from that Ludwig catalog.
What was that?
It was they had just put out this line. It was a mahogany finished set, and it had two 26-inch bass drums, and it had 2 rack toms, 4 floor toms, a couple of bongos. I mean, it pretty much had everything.
You had everything, and gongs, and
it had 2 gongs,
concert toms.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just the drum kit. It was just the way that you attacked the drum kits. And, I mostly have been playing in rock bands with Cuban musicians, and they had a whole different feel of playing, And watching you play was very, I would say, English approach to playing, which was very rare to find in Florida. It was very unique. Maybe it was because you came from New York, and you were not really bred in Florida. You haven't been there for a long time, so you had this more of a northern New York attitude to your drumming.
Yeah, part of it is because most of my favorite rock drummers were English. So those were my influences, John Bonham, Mitch Mitchell, Ian Pace. The list goes on and on. They were English. But the other thing is, when you played in a band on the East Coast, especially in New York, you had usually 2 guitar players that each had 2 Marshall Major stacks and a bass player with 6 Sun Coliseum, and then you had a drum set and no mics. So you had to really make sure you were heard and make sure that you were a force within this thing that was completely skewed against you, because no mics, no monitors, no anything. So you had to play for your life, literally.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But then again, if you look at the average English drummer that you were influenced by, their kits weren't really that big. I mean, if you look at Bonham, you got a rack tom, 2 floor toms. That's it. You had the whole percussion section up on stage, and everything was phenomenal about your playing. And by the time that Bowie came on, I kept telling the people I was with, it's like, oh man, this is sucking. They should bring back the opening band, especially the drummer. That's what really stuck with me after I left the show, because Bowie was going through his Ziggy Stardust, which I am a huge fan. I mean, so are you. Yeah. I mean, we all are. But for some reason, the presentation, which is a little, I don't know, artsy, campy, artsy. It wasn't really aggressive.
No, we were balls out.
Yeah, you guys were.
Yeah,
absolutely.
we knew we had 35 minutes to make an impression. And we didn't leave that stage without leaving everything out there. I mean, we did everything we possibly could.
Yeah.
And then we broke up the next day.
You guys did, I know.
Yes.
That's amazing. But, mentioning that Balls Out, which, later on we're going to be talking about, the mental health version of Quiet Riot, that was pretty much the attitude every single night. People ask me, wow, that, were you guys playing extra hard or at the US Festival? And I said, no, that was Quiet Riot. We played just like that at the US Festival.
Every single night.
Or at a club or opening up for ZZ Top. It didn't matter.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, some of the how I remember some of the musically greatest shows that we did before we played the US Festival, and when we were doing pickup dates in between opening up for everybody, and we do some little club that didn't know who we were. And it was like, crickets and tumbleweeds. There was nobody in there. And those were some of our musically greatest shows, because we were not affected by the lack of audience participation. We were there to make a point and make a statement. And we never took it for granted. That's one thing that Quiet Riot never took a show for granted, ever. And
it still doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so moving along, we actually, after that, shortly after us meeting, we got to play together. We put various incarnations of bands. One of them, most famous one, being called Lizard.
The Mighty Lizard.
The Mighty Lizard. And, they were short-lived. Yeah. We actually got to spend more time rehearsing than we actually did.
Yeah, we were fine-tuning it for the one gig.
Yeah, and always the hardest thing to do was to find a singer. We would sometimes we'll be hanging at the Flying Machine parking lot and find somebody that sold Quaaludes but looked really cool.
Right.
Had
wardrobe.
Had wardrobe. Had the right haircut. Couldn't sing,
but looked great. Yeah.
Looked great.
Yeah.
They said, you know what, this guy could be our singer. Right. And then he would show
a lot of reverb on his voice. Makes him down,
And my experience playing with you, actually, it was my musical shift, because, like I mentioned, up until that, I have been playing purely with Cuban musicians, which is nothing wrong with that. But I knew I was missing an element of rock that was not Latinized,
right?
Because every Cuban musician that I play up until that point, we always had our Latin roots that we brought to rock and roll.
And there's a certain rhythm to it that's different from a rock kind of feel.
Oh, absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So playing with you was my introduction to that, and actually getting to, and you make me aware of the bass player's role within the rhythm section. And also you have this huge collection of records because you used to work at a record store.
Sid's Records and Tapes, yeah.
And you turned
all three Sid's Records and Tapes, not just one, all three of them.
And you had this massive collection of prog rock, fusion, all the European stuff that you never really heard of in Miami.
Yeah.
I had to drive up to your house in Fort Lauderdale, which is like maybe 20 minutes.
Yeah, my neighborhood was a suburb of Amsterdam.
And you played me all this music, and it was like, oh my God, this is incredible stuff. So it was basically a musical education that actually enhanced what I already had as a musical background up until then, and I never went back. Even though we stopped playing together for a while because you went on to do.
What year
we're talking about 75. 75.
75. Yeah, 75.
Yeah.
I went out. That was my second venture to Los Angeles. To try to be successful.
Right. Yeah. How did it go?
I had no plan. I had no plan whatsoever. This is the entirety of my plan. I had my 5-piece Green Sparkle Ludwig drum set, and I took the drum heads off and put my clothes and toiletries and canned food, and boxes of cereal inside the drums, put the heads back on, put them in the cases, and then went to Fort Lauderdale Airport. My mom took me to the airport, and those were the days where you could give a skycap $20 and as much luggage as you want.
Yeah.
So I had all that stuff, and I get to LAX, and I'm at the famous white zone, the no parking white zone.
Yeah.
And I have $300 to my name and this drum set, and I'm sitting on the cases with no plan. And as it happened, the previous time that I had come out to LA in '72, I had met a guy that was a tech, but back then we called them roadies. And as I'm sitting there trying to figure out, okay, how to best spend as little of my $300 to get into Hollywood, just to get into Hollywood, and then I don't know what. And this SIR, Studio Instrument Rental Van, passes by and backs up. And the guy gets out and he goes, "Frankie? Greg?" It was the guy that I had met 3 years before. He goes, "What are you doing?" And I told him, and he goes, "All right, throw your stuff in the back of the SIR van." Threw the stuff in the SIR van. He got me a storage locker for free, and I put the drums in the storage locker, and he let me sleep on his couch until I started to meet people and started to play, and that was the start of it. The interesting thing about it is my next door neighbor, and I'm going to forget his name now. He's a huge producer. He was in a band called Skylark.
Oh.
God, I can't remember his name now. It'll come to me. But I tried to get a gig in that band. They had a new record out that was breaking. They had a single that was out. I was just simply
David Foster.
I was simply too loud. But he was, he liked me. His wife at the time absolutely hated me, which didn't help me. And he was my next door neighbor. Well, he was Greg's next door neighbor.
Yeah.
I was sleeping on Greg's, and I got him to jump off. It was a second story, typical North Hollywood Studio City apartment building that has the pool down in the middle, and I got him to jump from the second level with me into the pool. All sorts of things that you would not imagine that he would do.
No wonder the wife hated you. You're trying to kill my husband.
She just hated the sight of me. I mean, if I was a bottle of milk and she looked at me, I would immediately turn into cottage cheese. I would just curdle. She hated me. She hated me that much. But so ended up putting another band together out in LA, and we actually went into Wally Hyder's to record with Bones Howe, and then nothing came of it. And I was making little bits of money here and there, but at some point I just had to say, put all your stuff back in the drums and go back to Fort Lauderdale and regroup.
Now, is that when you started playing